The
illustrious Jabba bids you welcome. I'm going to regret this.
I'm Pete Mitchell. He's Peyton Jones. And this is the Church Planter Podcast, brought to you by Church Planter Magazine. Reach was designed for externally focused churches seeking to reach more people in their communities. With Reach, you're giving your congregation the tools needed to tell their friends about your church on social media and help people in need around the world, all at the same time. Every weekend, each check-in or review on social media results in a donation to a kingdom-building cause, allowing your community to be on mission both locally and globally with the touch of a button. Ready to put your social media in the hands of your congregation? Visit Causley.com and sign up with the promo code PODCAST. No pressure, no contracts, and we'll even waive our $99 onboarding fee. That's Causley.com, promo code PODCAST.
Mamma mia, that's a spicy meatball.
That's all I'm saying.
Indeed, it was a spicy meatball.
It was a spicy meatball. So welcome, everyone, to the Church Planter Podcast. I am your host, Pete Mitchell, and I'm here with my little buddy, Peyton Jones.
Oh, he comes right out of the gate swinging today.
Dude, what I love is how, that offends you more than most things.
I don't know why. I should be thinking, you're Hoss, I'm little Joe. Come on, little buddy. Remember that? That's a good thing. You just called me Michael Landon. Whether I'm Paul or Little Joe, that's a compliment. But my short man syndrome gets in the way of all logic.
It's the short man syndrome. You've got a bad case of it. That's all I'm saying.
I have a really bad case of it. There is no denying that whatsoever. Oh, hey, only professionalism on this podcast, my friend.
If you're wondering what in the world does this podcast have to do with church planting, sometimes we... What is going on? Oh my gosh, man.
What was that?
All of a sudden, Voxer went off.
That's rad. So my phone, your Voxer. What a pair.
I tell you, man. I tell you. Okay, so here's the deal, guys. You're listening to the Church Planter Podcast. At some point, we're going to get to some church planting information. But until then, this is our chance to basically catch up on each other's lives. Peyton, I believe you have a story you want to tell them about me.
No, yeah, I do actually. I should not be.
You said it as a joke. You didn't think I was going to go there. Before we started the podcast, you're like, I'm going to tell people that Pete called me crying because no one thinks that he cries. And you thought I wouldn't go there.
Look, man, we're best friends. So that's what we do. But I was teasing Pete before, hey, I got smack talk. I'm going to talk about how you called me crying, which now makes me look like a very bad person. Well, it was a joke because there's this thing about how Pete Mitchell is a machine. He has no feelings, no heart.
Here's the thing that people got to understand. Okay, guys, I'll tell you, here's what happened. And the reason why I called Peyton crying, I had to put down my dog this week. Right. This was my dog, not the family dog, not my wife's dog, my dog. Right. And I work at home. So my dog's always with me. I had to put her down this week. I'm a wreck. And really what I was calling Peyton for was to get some support. And all he did was jab me. No, I'm just kidding.
He just laughed cruelly on the phone.
Actually, what I was calling for is I really wanted advice on how do I talk to my kids about this? I got a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I never had to deal with this before. So and I needed to get it out, which, by the way, I can honestly tell you, I am so grateful that I was able to call you because I needed to get out all of that, angst and hurt and all that stuff. And because by the time we were done talking, we were cracking jokes about other stuff. So here's the reason why this
I had seen Wind River the night before, so I knew what to do.
Yes.
I was like, I've been prepped for this very moment right now.
Tell me, was that not the greatest movie?
It was rad, but it traumatized my wife. So thanks. And by the way, just so you guys know, I'm on the phone at the food truck. We're trying to decide what movie we're going to see. I'm going to say, hey, Andrew goes, oh, but it's not going to be one of these. No. Pete said, so I call Pete just to double check. Hey, Pete, by the way, we're thinking of seeing Wind River. Can I take Andrew to that? Or is that going to be like, is there a bunch of gore? Is there this? No, she'll love it.
There's not a lot of gore.
I took Jamie to it. And so anyways, on the way out, she looks at me and goes, I will never again trust Pete's recommendation on a movie.
What was so gory about it?
It wasn't gore. It was just some heavy stuff in that movie.
It's heavy stuff, but that's not gore.
Yeah.
Come on, your wife's stronger than that. She can take it.
It's heavy.
What about
and what was rad is
what about the gunfight at the OK Corral? Was that not
rad? I loved it, man. It was great.
Oh, dude, I'm telling you, it's the same guy who did Sicario. He does the same thing in that movie. It's awesome.
Oh yeah. My favorite line in that movie. Was when the guy says, I'm hijacking Smack Talk. Sorry.
How about when the guy says, how do you know what your death face looks like? Huh? Come on.
It was pretty good.
Come on.
He goes, I don't know. I'm making it up. The part I loved was where the guy goes, hey man, I figured, I used to be angry at the world and want to rage on the world and fight the world. And he goes, and I eventually realized the world would win. So, he changed his tactic. I love that line, and which I just butchered. So it was a lot better.
I got to see it again because I don't remember that one.
It was when he was talking to a little kid in the back of the cop car. And then the other line, my favorite line of the movie was, and this is an odd line to have as your favorite, admittedly, but was where he says to the girl, he was just one of the cops. He just looks at the FBI agent and he's like, you didn't see that just then. Now, when they started flanking him.
Oh, yeah.
I loved it. It was just the way it was done.
Well,
where you're trying to guess, and he goes, you didn't see that. You didn't see that just then. That part was brilliant.
I see the conversation when they're sitting under the swing. That was a brilliant conversation.
Yes, it was.
That was just, so you knew how to handle my loss of a dog.
I knew. I was prepped. I was like, I just saw this. I know what to do.
My loss of a close family member. You knew how to handle it. And, so my question to Peyton was, I was like, I don't know how to bring this up with my kids. Like, I couldn't go home after I had to have my dog put down because I'm a wreck, right? This is my girl. And I certainly couldn't go home like that because I'm like, dude, my kids are going to be traumatized from death. They're never going to know how to deal with death when they see Karate Man crying. So I was like, how do I bring this up to them? How do I talk to them? And you gave some very wise counsel. You're like, first of all, don't talk to them for a day or two. Just tell them she's at the hospital, which is partially true, right?
Yeah, that's where you left her.
That's where I left her. Last time I saw her, she was there at the hospital. And I got to be careful how loud I say this because I still haven't had the conversation with my kid, which was what I was going to tell you. Like yesterday, they never even brought it up. They never even where's Lucy? None of that. No, they're just.
Didn't we say about your youngest daughter that you'd be like, hey, I talk to you about Lucy, and she'd be like, who's Lucy?
But dude, my youngest daughter would be like, yay! She never liked Lucy. Lucy always bothered her. But Luke's the one I was worried about. He's a 6-year-old, and so far, I don't even know if I have to have the conversation. Right now, I'm thinking I may never have to bring it up.
That's rad, man. I had the best.
But I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Let me tag this on so people understand our sense of humor and why you can poke fun of me about crying. Because what do I say to you when your mom dies? Hey, do you want me to send you the helium dolphin so you can float it around the funeral?
Which is so what my family does. I cannot even tell you some of the stuff that happened.
You showed
when my
that
mom
text
passed.
to your brother, and your brother was like, "Oh, he gets it." Because So people need to understand we understand each other better than most people, and that's why we can say these things to each other, and it's not like neither one of us are offended.
Pete and I are deeply broken. I mean, when my mom passed, my brother, I had given my mom, she didn't get to read my book, and she was very, very ill. And so when my book came out, she was too ill to read it. But when Church Zero came out, I know it's your mom, but like my mom was so proud. And everybody has a mom. It doesn't matter who you are. It just feels good when your mom thinks everything you do is rad,
sure.
Right? There's not many other people doing life. You know what I mean? So I felt this hollow absence when this book came out. As well as the book is done, as much as it's, people were quoting it and whatever, still it was kind of like the one voice that I really want to hear was my mom, because she was so proud, and that was gone this time. So when I was visiting her, I knew that I was visiting her to die. I knew that before I got on the plane. And, we were seeing her out, and I brought her a copy of the book because the book had just dropped. And it was there, and I don't know if I can, after my mom died, it's just the way my family is. Like, we were both destroyed internally. Like I still can't say I'm completely right. But one of the first things my brother does is goes and sticks the book on my mom and goes, "Hey, here's a picture for your book," because everybody kept taking pictures of the book in like Bono's hands, the Pope's hands, Billy Graham's hands, Bill and Ted, Wayne's World. There was all these pictures of, the Lord of the Rings, Indiana Jones. Immediately say, "Let's get a picture." And we laughed, because that's how we handle grief, and it weirds other people out. Yeah. I'm sure there's something terribly broken in us.
Well,
but
what's funny? I'm going to throw this out there. We've talked about this on the podcast. Stephanie, who's in the Platinum Bible Inner Circle, which you can find all about at BibleInnerCircle.com.
In fact, Pete, this episode is brought to you by BibleInnerCircle.com. Cha-ching!
She said, when Tim asked me to start listening to your podcast, my first thought was, are these two guys even saved? Now
we are saved. We are twisted. We are warped, but we are saved.
And now you understand, ladies and gentlemen, why people wonder, are we even saved? But I had one of my assistants, I asked him to listen to our podcast this last week, because I was like, dude, this is a good one. You'll really like it. And he's never listened to our podcast before. I kid you not. He's sitting over here right by me, right? He says to me, he goes, "I can see why people wonder if you guys are saved."
I cannot believe that was his response. That is so rad.
That was so his response, man.
How long has he been a Christian, Pete?
He's probably like, how long has Pete been a Christian? Is he really a Christian? Let's think about this. Yeah. So
that is so dang funny.
I had to share that with you.
Oh, that's hilarious. So what was really funny though was this week I had a great story, and I was preaching at my sending church this week, and which is always just rad, right? Like, I love my sending pastor. He's a really good dude, and it was an honor to be there. And what was even cooler was in the audience, the couple guys over at Refuge Long Beach, they still go there in the midweek just to hear from our sending. It's how they feed, right? So they go to the mothership, and so while I'm preaching, I look, and Mike Bonomo's out there, and Chris Langham's out there, and it was just good. Jonathan Ferguson was there. He was at Refuge Long Beach for about a year. And it was just really cool to like look out and be like, these are my peeps. And I even said like, hey, Refuge Long Beach in the house, boom, boom, point them out, represent. But afterwards, we just sat on the steps and just chilled and talked and laughed. And people were coming up talking, hey, thanks for tonight. Or, hey, I went to Refuge San Pedro. It was incredible. It was in the hood. We were going to go back. That's the most radical thing we've ever done, blah, blah, blah. So it was really cool, but we're sitting there, and this woman comes up to us, and she was maybe like 60 years old. I don't know, and she, her appearance was, such that, you could see she'd been through a rough time, and, she was missing a lot of hair, and, I don't know who she was, but she was talking. She was saying, "Hey, they're doing a 20-year recognition service for Pastor Bill because he's been there 20 years." And she said, as she was talking, she just threw out as an aside. I don't remember what it was. It was something in the, I'm not talking about this, but but that one right there is very handsome. I'm just being real. I can't. And she's talking about Bonomo. and Bonomo goes, "Oh," and like, what's funny is any other group of people, it could have been real awkward, but we just started rolling with it and laughing and like, "Oh, that's rad." And Mike's like, "Yeah," but he looks at me and goes, "But he calls me Ugly Face." That's, if you don't know this, like my nickname for Bonomo's Ugly Face. Every time I see him, "What's up, Ugly Face?" And
people wonder why. People wonder if we're saved or not.
Yes, you serve with me. It's interesting. Chris Langham's the evil genius. He's that, what's that guy, Mastermind, or what's the guy on that where he's Megamind? That's who Chris Langham is, the guy with the really big head.
Yep.
So anyways, we all have nicknames. Mine is Extremely Tall Man, which is a good nickname to have. And, anyways, but it was just the funniest thing. And then at some point, one of us said something about, he is a good looking man. And then the lady starts asking, "What, do you like him too?"
Oh, no.
It just got super funny. It got funnier and funnier because we're all popping off and making cracks. And, now that I'm telling the story, I kind of realize he had to be there. It was funnier in my head than when I started telling it. But
I love you, man.
But it's just good to see those guys, man. I tell you, you read Paul's epistles, and when there was just something sweet, like I wanted to be nowhere else than sitting on that step with those couple guys.
Yeah.
It's just good, man.
I think one of the things, and I was actually thinking about that because that was the day that I had to have my dog put down. And I was actually so grateful that you had to drive all the way up there because you had time to talk. Normally we can't have a midweek conversation like that. And I'm like,
when you called, I was getting off the 73 onto the 405, where it's like to go maybe like 3 miles takes 25 minutes.
Yeah.
And so I was a very captive audience, man.
You're like,
I had nowhere to be, nothing to do.
Yeah. It actually kind of reminds me of, you ever see The Fugitive, Harrison Ford?
Yeah.
Remember when he's trying to find the one-armed man and he finds a guy with the name that he's looking for, and he's in jail. He's a one-armed man. Maybe it wasn't the name. It was just a one-armed man, and he was in jail. And it ends up being a black guy, and he knows the guy's not black because he wrestled with him. It was a white guy that he was looking for. And the guy's like, "Well, you got me out of jail. We might as well talk about something."
Right?
It's like, well, I got nothing better to do. That's your time on the freeway right then was, well, we might as well talk about something. I got nothing better to do but sit on the freeway for 25 minutes.
Little did I know it was like a real need, right? So,
dude, anyone who's lost their dog knows what I'm going through. And then to top it all off, you're like telling me your experience of losing your cat. And what's my comment to you? Yeah.
Well, first off,
but that's a cat.
I'm like, oh man, it's so stupid. These little things. And I tell them, when I got kicked in the teeth by that church, it wasn't the church that made me move. I stayed there for like almost a year being a firefighter. And then I watched my cat die in my living room, and that destroyed me. And Andrea came back from America, and I'm like, we got to move. I can't be in this house anymore. And I'm telling you this story going, hey, man, I relate. And you go, yeah, but it's just a cat.
Dude, we're so messed up.
It is messed up. But this is why we found each other, Pete. God knew.
This is why we only have each other.
When my dad died, still, I'll never forget to this day that me and my brother just popping off jokes, and we're dying inside, man. Like we're dying, but we're cracking all these jokes. And my dad's best friend, he got so mad. He's like, "Hey man," like he just started yelling at us. It's not funny because he's taking it totally the wrong way, and we're trying. We had to explain. Oh, sorry, man, it's really messed up. This is how we grieve, and my family. It's. We laugh. Well, shoot, man, after being a firefighter and a nurse, gosh, man, I was thinking about this the other day. I was just thinking about, I made a comment to somebody about the amount of death that I have seen from a young age. I was 19 when I did my first bit of CPR on a 39-year-old woman and watched her slip into eternity. And from there on, man, the amount of, I can't remember what it was, if it was Band of Brothers call or what, where I mentioned and I threw out there, I've seen some horrific things. I think it was on that call when the guy talked about hospice care. And I didn't go into it then, but I mean, you know, the amount of horrific things that I've had to do as a firefighter and experience, and before that as a nurse, and then as a pastor, like, dude, like death has been a big part of my life.
Yep.
And I forget that sometimes. That triggered. So I started seeing memories of things during that Band of Brothers call. And I kind of was taken back, like, man, I have dealt with. So that sense of humor is kind of a little bit of it's a coping mechanism, my friend.
Mm.
Mamma mia, that's a spicy meatball.
You know, we should have started off our smack talk with. I'm just saying, we should have had the appropriate music.
When we talked this week, I told you that my favorite clip we don't have, and I need to go grab it. If you guys want to grab it and email it to us, calm down, ding diddly, ding diddly. They did their best, shaddly diddly. Gotta be nice, hot diddly diddly. Oh, ding 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 down, hell crap. That's my favorite one. Flanders cussing is what that's known as.
Yeah, I totally forgot it, man.
Yeah, we gotta find these, man.
I think I gotta.
Did you ever take the ones I put in the Dropbox for you?
Did you put other ones than what I've played?
Tons in it. Well, like a couple months ago. You got to take all those out.
I don't know that I have any other. I don't think I do have any other ones.
Yeah. Oh man, we need to stock your trout pond, man. That's all I'm saying.
And still, our favorite right now?
I made my money the old-fashioned way. I got run over by a Lexus.
It is my favorite right now. Totally my favorite.
And so with that, boys and girls, you really need to join the Bivo Inner Circle, because unless you're going to get run over by a Lexus, you're going to need to make some extra money. And we've got a way for you to do that. Head on over to bivoinnercircle.com and find out how bivocational pastors and church planners are making a living. Scott, let us know what you think.
Hi, I'm Scott Blair, church planner. If you are anything like I used to be, you probably woke up feeling alone and somewhat isolated today, wondering to yourself, why isn't there just one place that I can go to discuss the things I really care about, like bear attacks, Sir Mix-a-Lot, Game of Thrones, and even Christology? Well, I'm here to tell you such
Bear
a place
attacks.
now exists. This is not make-believe. I would not joke about a thing like this. Pete Mitchell and Peyton Jones have created such a place. No. It's not heaven. They didn't create that, but it's the next best thing. The Bivo Ministry Inner Circle.
I'm telling you, man, I die every time I hear him doing that because it's so funny to me.
So good. And you know, it's off the hip. I remember every single one of those conversations. That's the weird thing.
The bear attacks one, I tried saving it. I don't know if it's saved
in
Voxer, because Voxer had a problem in it. It lost a lot of my saved messages. So,
you know, we have some great conversations on there. So you run the Bivo, the consulting one and the I don't know what you call it. Platinum. Yeah. So, and I do the ministry one, and it is so fun. But I got to tell you, sometimes those conversations, the bear attacks sparked a whole, what was your scariest animal encounter? And man, it was crazy. Hey, David, he was picking from a multitude of them.
I thought Jared's was the funniest.
Which one was that?
I can't even repeat it because it involved profanity in front of some missionaries when he saw a rat in his garage. And then everyone laughs because he's the church planner and he's dropping, oh, crap. But it wasn't crap. Because he said he saw like the world's biggest rat he'd ever seen.
So Jonathan Ferguson used to be a missionary in Kenya. And he had one of the scariest videos I've ever seen
Is this the cobra?
of him decapitating a cobra in his laundry room, and the thing is still trying to bite him with its head cut off. That was a terrifying video, and the thing was massive. Then he's got
that'd be a great illustration of sin.
Well, check this out. So what he was doing in Kenya is he's teaching at a Bible college, and all of a sudden one day he's teaching on how Jesus, no kidding, hurls the serpent into the lake of fire. And outside, there's all this yelling outside the classroom, and they run out there, and there's a cobra, and there's everyone's screaming and running around. And so there's a gardener there. He grabs the hoe. He literally grabs his hoe, jumps in the air, lands, and apparently the story is that someone threw him the hoe as he was running by. He yelled for them to throw it. He jumps in the air, catches it, comes down on the snake's head, decapitates it, in one move, spins around, says to his class who's watching, and that's how Jesus cut off the serpent's head. That is apparently the true story.
I remember hearing that, man.
It's a thing of legend, and it was how he got the job in Long Beach. We figured if you can do that, you can come and help us in Refuge Long Beach.
Does he help at Refuge Long Beach?
He did. He did for about a year.
Nice,
yeah.
Nice.
He's now back over at the mothership doing junior high.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
The
Which
Church
is
Planner
maybe
podcast
even tougher.
isn't the podcast that planners deserve, but the podcast they need.
That's all I'm saying.
Can you hear those spinning blades of death in the background?
Not really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear that?
I just barely.
Okay. All right.
So what is today's topic?
So today's topic, it's interesting. It's going to be a rare one for you guys, but about half of you statistically will get a lot out of it. The Bible says mourn with those who mourn. I want to talk about depression in the ministry. Depression in the ministry is something that's not really talked about a lot, but church planners are probably more susceptible to it than the average Joe. The reason why is you're often working bivocationally. You may not have enough funds. There's tensions and pulls. There's a sense of being overwhelmed by the unknown. It's not just like babysitting a church or trying to build something out of nothing. And with that comes a huge proclivity towards depression. And so I want to talk about depression in the ministry. In particular, depression in the ministry was something that historically has been common, and great men of God in church history have talked about it. John Calvin struggled with it. It tends to be people that are big achievers. I'm not a depressed kind of guy, but I got to say, when my mom did pass away, I went through a period where I sat at my desk for an entire almost 2 weeks and could barely even think, barely put two thoughts together. And because I have a huge work ethic, I showed up and I sat there and I tried doing things, and it was like, good luck. I think ended up watching some YouTube videos and trying to answer some emails, but it was like my brain literally was so overcome with the grief of losing my mom. And I'm a karate man. I don't show it on the outside, like Eddie Murphy said, but it was there, and it slowed me down. And I've never been a depressed type of person. I've never really understood. I understand it. I studied it. I worked with it as a psych nurse, but I've never understood it personally, just because I feel unsinkable. If I have something knock me down, I'm going to get up right away. If I have something crush me, I'll come out of it. It doesn't linger. But that's not because I have it more together or I have anything that I'm doing. It's more a temperamental thing. And there are things that you can do to fight off depression physically. There are things you can do emotionally. There are things you can do mentally. But it's not a result of what I'm doing. Some people are more prone to depression than others.
I think what we need to do is we need to kind of break down, when you say depression, we need to start off by by kind of defining that, because there's different types of depression. But before we do that,
Great Scott! It's time for this week's topic. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty.
so let's start it with that. Break down, a definition of depression as we're using it in our context here.
So there are two, there are two causes of depression. There's biochemical depression. Biochemical depression is something that literally between your brain cells is something, your neurons, you have synapses, and there's a gap that between that gap, you have electrical impulses that go across the gap. When you are depressed, the electrical impulses in your brain go slower. And that might be because you have what's called a neurotransmitter, which if you think of that gap between two brain cells, there's chemicals that float in between there, and they help conduct the electrical charge across the chasm. There's a chasm. They're not touching each other, these brain cells, on a microscopic level. And so the electrical impulse travels across the neurotransmitter. Think of it as like stepping stones. The electrical charge, has a conduit from these chemicals, and it leapfrogs from chemical to chemical and then gets to the other brain cell. Now, when you're depressed, your brain is either chemically depressed, your brain is not producing enough neurotransmitters, or there are also neuroreceptors, and there's on the lining of those brain cells is a certain chemical. Maybe your brain's not producing enough chemical to line those brain cells to receive that transmission. So there is a physical phenomenon where we can observe depression taking place. So when you see these yahoos, I watched a documentary about Scientology, and it made me want to look up Tom Cruise and, look at some of his philosophy. Scientology will teach you that there's no such thing as depression, which is absolute bogus nonsense. And they'll say, oh, well, we have all the facts and the pharmaceutical. No, it is a scientific phenomenon. It actually happens. And Scientology is very motivated because they say, hey, rather than going to a psychologist or a psychiatrist and getting drugs prescribed for that, go to us instead and spend your life's fortune buying our products. So that there is a motive behind there, not to commit the fallacy ad hominem circumstantial, which says, hey, you're going to gain some. It has nothing to do with the validity of the argument, but the scientific fact proves that this is a phenomenon. The other type of depression is something where, in order to deal with stress, it's called situational depression. Your body actually compartmentalizes things in your life, and it starts to shut down. Much like when your body goes into shock, all of the blood is shunted to your heart and brain, your upper body. In the same way, situational depression will slow you down. It's a response to anxiety. Almost all mental illness is a response in some way, shape, or form to anxiety. So depression, in many ways, can be a defense mechanism, right? It's a way of the body saying, whoa, slow down. You got a lot of stress that you're dealing with. So in the case of my mom, that was situational depression. The loss of my mom was such a huge loss and such a huge stressor, that my body, to protect my mind, my brain said, right, we're just going to slow down. And I literally felt like I was thinking and moving through jello, and I could not do anything about it. So this is something that happens. Those are the two major causes of depression. And it really just means when you shut down.
Right. And the main reason why I wanted you to address that is, and we've talked about this on the podcast before, and we've talked about mental illness and things of that nature. What we're trying to get people to understand who don't experience the chemical imbalance. We're trying to get them to understand that there is such a thing as a chemical imbalance. Like, it's not just situational depression. A guy like me, that's not one of the things that I struggle with. I struggle with a lot of things, but I don't struggle with depression. But that's a uniqueness to me And some people who have that, right, who are like me, who don't struggle with it, they discount depression. They discount the chemical reaction that's going on in other people's bodies.
Right.
And that's why I think it's so important for people to understand that this is a real thing that lately, obviously, it's getting press and people are talking about the medical side of things. And obviously you've got, Rick Warren and who lost his son, who lost his son to suicide, who dealt with a lifetime of depression. And a lot of people are just like, well, it's, you're just taking the cop out when you kill yourself. It's because they don't understand what other people are going through. And the only reason why I even understand it, and I would say I understand it, I can't relate to it, but I would say I can understand it because I've had a family member who had to deal with it and still deals with it and will deal with it their entire life.
Right.
And I mean, suicide's been a real part of this person's existence. Attempts, constantly the mind going back to it because they live in this chemical induced state.
Right.
That I can't even fathom. I literally can't, because it just, to me, I understand suicide because who hasn't been situationally depressed, right? I lost my dog this week.
Yeah.
I've been in situational depression.
Yeah.
And I can't fathom waking up and spending my entire day after day, week after week, month after month in that kind of a funk. I don't want to imagine it.
Right. Right. I mean, the reality is that when you're in it, you feel like a prisoner in your own body. You don't feel like you actually you don't have control. You're a victim of it. It's not like you can suck it up, buttercup. It's not like you can, someone comes in and says, hey, buck up, little camper, you'll take this hill, give you a pep talk and get you out of it. And that's often what happens. I mean, when, what you got to do is you just got to kind of, if it's situational, you got to get through it. I mean, and that takes time. Your body is defending itself, your mind. So yeah, you're defending yourself, against a stressor. For example, one of the most famous examples of depression is Charles Spurgeon. He's not the only one. But Charles Spurgeon he really suffered with depression. And when someone asks him that question, we always quote it on here, do you ever want to quit? And he goes about, every other week, about once a fortnight. Yeah, I often want to quit. Charles Spurgeon started of course, he had a lot of physical ailments, which probably led to a biochemical depression. He had problems with his liver and his kidneys and all kinds of things, but he had gout, he had a lot of things wrong. But he also at the same time went through his first depression when the balcony collapsed at his church and people died. Someone shouted, apparently, reportedly, fire, and it crushed. I can't remember, when the balcony collapsed, I think it crushed about 13 people, 14 people, they died. And Satan just used that to torment that guy. He struggled with it, like, why did that happen? He had to work out all this stuff about, here he was preaching the gospel and this terrible accident happened in his church and made him ask a bunch of questions, but he suffered for a long time. And his wife, she was part of the breakthrough. Same with Martin Luther. Martin Luther had fits of depression so bad that he literally locked himself in a room. And Katie von Bora, who was his wife, literally took the door off the hinges to get to him, because he wouldn't eat, he wouldn't do anything. And she's like, hey, you're going to die in here. These are not weak people that we're talking about. And that's the first thing to understand is if you're a church planner, it's not a sign of weakness for you to be depressed. And so a lot of times people hide depression because they feel, well, if I share this with people, they can tell me I'm not fit for ministry. Well, tell that to Spurgeon. Tell that to Martin Luther. Tell that to William Cooper, who wrote some of the most beautiful hymns in the world. The one of note dealing with this depression is God moves in mysterious ways, his wonders to perform. That was actually a hymn that came out of a time where he was under terrible depression. And if you don't know who William Cooper is, it was John Newton's best friend. Remember how cool of a guy John Newton was, right? Former slave trader, wrote Amazing Grace, went blind. He's been in movies. He's been depicted. He was an amazing dude. He was an Anglican minister, very real, very down to earth, having come from the background he came through. But the reality is, he was trying to kill himself multiple times in multiple ways. He jumped from a carriage over what he thought was a cliff, and they had a bunch of rain, so rather than being like a craggy bottom, he landed in water. So he didn't die. He tried hanging himself on a tree, and the branch broke. He tried falling on a knife, and the knife, I think the knife itself, something happened. He just could not kill himself. And when he came out of it, and what would happen is he would sometimes go into the type of depression that he would hallucinate, and he would kind of go mad. And there were times where John Newton used to literally go sit with him because they were best friends, and he would go sit with him and literally hold him while the guy was like going nuts, right? Like trying to destroy a room or kill himself, and John Newton would just sit there and hold him, like until the guy fell asleep or got too exhausted. Like, that's crazy friendship. And so, here you will find church history is filled with men and women that God used massively, and they were no strangers to depression or discouragement. So, really, Charles Spurgeon even, by the way, has a chapter on this called The Minister's Fainting Fits. I'll just tell you guys, that Wednesday night that I went and preached recently, I knew it. I could feel it that night. I prayed all the way home Wednesday night. I've been exhausted, and I've spoken a lot recently, and everywhere I'm going, I'm underprepared, I'm overextended, and when I get out of the pulpit, I'm exhausted. And I was driving home, and I could feel it. I'm like, I'm exhausted. I know what's going to happen tomorrow morning. I'm going to wake up at some crazy hour. The enemy's going to come in telling me I didn't exalt Christ enough. I didn't preach good. I don't have the power of the Holy Spirit with me. These are all of his favorite weapons, right? Like when I'm done preaching, if you look for my sermons, by the way, this is something I have to get over. If you look for my sermons right now, you'll find that they're not really online. And the reason why they're not online is because I get embarrassed over them. And it's how Satan attacks me. Satan attacks me through my speaking, which ironically is probably one of my greatest gifts. And yet it's the area that I'm the most self-conscious about. I always feel like I could have prayed, it's not a legalism. Let me explain. It's a huge responsibility, and I feel that responsibility, I guess is what I'm saying. So Satan's always attacking me, and I have to curl up into a ball, hide myself in the rock, make sure that I'm covered with the blood, all those things that you do, put the breastplate of righteousness on. That's what I have to do. And so Satan will kick me, one side or the other. Well, when this has been 20 something years for me, but when you're new to this, it can crush you. And so Spurgeon has this whole chapter called The Minister's Fainting Fits. And he points out, he starts off with David, and he says, did you hear a beep just then?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was weird. I've never had that happen before. My some weird dial pad came up on Skype. What? So, it's funny, Spurgeon kind of brings up David, and he says in the Psalms, David was prone to depression. Why so downcast, O my soul? And he goes off and he says, hey, are you surprised at the end of seeing these people are you surprised they're men? Are you surprised they're merely human beings? Are you surprised that they're just real people that God uses? I mean, that's kind of the point, right? So, the first thing I say, church planners, don't beat up on yourself. Understand that this is going to be normal. And I'll stop talking there because I'm going off.
Am I supposed to comment on this?
You're allowed to talk now, Pete.
Don't do that.
Well, yeah, I got nothing, man.
Okay, all right. I just figure, every once in a while I got to come up for air and see if to interrupt me. We've been doing this long enough.
Well, the thing is, you're talking about a subject that I don't have a lot of experience with the dealing with it on a personal level. And that's really what we're speaking to here. I've had to deal with it and can probably speak to some degree, though I don't think necessarily greatly, on how to deal with other people who have it. And what I really can't speak to, but it's an issue. What about when your spouse has it? And your spouse, because now you're dealing with,
That's a good question.
The stress that you're under, right? Let's say it's your church. Let's say you're out there, you're, preaching and meeting with people in the church, and then you got a spouse that is going through this. I mean, that's just enough that's enough to tear down everything. Mentally.
I think so too. And you have to know how to deal with that at that time. So, there's a couple things. Number one, that, Spurgeon's first point in lectures of my student is some of us have physical ailments, and he put some of his down to the fact that he had a frail physical condition or his physique. And that surely affects it. So if you're sick, think of the times when you're sick. Are you chipper? Are you positive? No, you're miserable, and that affects it. So people who have physical ailments tend to struggle with this more. Not everybody who has a physical. Some people are amazing. Their bodies thrash, but their psyche is good. But it's just a tendency. And so often when you have something physical, it affects you. But then, and I'll get to the spouse part, but the other thing is, because there is a physical link between depression. I remember we used to deal with people that were so severely depressed in the hospital that they couldn't shower. Like literally, they wouldn't wash themselves. They couldn't get out of bed. They couldn't get dressed. There is such a state of depression to where you literally don't even have the motivation to move. Mm. And people have a hard time picturing that, but that's how much the brain has physically slowed down. And so you have to make them eat. You have to make them get up and and the hardest thing was we used to have to make people take showers. And when I say make, we would not leave them alone until they took a shower. And all they wanted was for us to leave them alone. So we just keep bothering them. It's time for your shower. I'm sorry. You need to take a shower. Mm. This is my job. This is knowing that when they took the shower, they would feel better.
Right.
We would make them walk. Right? Look, you have to walk. No, I don't want to. Listen, I just need you to walk to the end of the hallway and back. I'll be right. And you can come right back in here. It's really hard, right? It's not an easy job, but that's the stuff we had to do, because when the body starts moving and gets exercise, it produces endorphins. Endorphins make you feel better. So there is a brain or mind-body connection that cannot be denied. And so you couldn't just throw drugs at people. You had to make sure they were clean, they were hygienic. You had to make sure that they got exercise. There was all kinds of things. Diet plays into this. So the first thing that I say to anyone suffering depression is, are you exercising? Are you getting enough sleep? And are you eating right? And by eating right, I don't mean, are you gluten-free? I mean, are you eating vegetables? Are you eating fruits? Are you getting your vitamins? Are you getting your minerals? Are you eating fiber? Are you, there's all those things. Are you eating enough protein? Are you, these things all have to do with it. And healthy choices will make you literally gain energy. If you don't eat good food, you will not have energy, just period. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, have you identified, in the case of situational depression, have you identified what's causing the stressor? If you're like, it's the ministry, you're probably right. Ministry is really tough. And so this goes to the, it could be, like you said, it could be something else, in your life. It could be like, for me, it wasn't ministry. It was my mom. But when it comes to identifying the issue, you just need to actually say, what is the major stressor in my life? That is probably, or it could be death by 1,000 paper cuts, could be 4, 5, 6 things that combined you're stressed, right? Kind of like that old Police song, Synchronicity 2, where he like mentions all the stressors this poor guy has, this family man, as he's driving home from work, and and he's pent up, and he's kind of pressing it all down and brushing under the rug, and something's got to give. He keeps saying, somewhere something has to give, and that's often what happens. Eventually we burn out and depression sets in. So that's how it works. It's a response, like I said, to anxiety. So identify the stressors in your life. And then once you've done that, you need other people. And that's kind of where I'm going with, if your major stressor is the ministry, then you need people to carry that burden with you, right? It makes no sense in today's modern model of ministry of why someone would try to carry an entire church or church plant or congregation by themselves, even a small group, man. Like Jesus sent everybody out 2 by 2. Paul, when he's in prison, is just writing to people. And in every epistle he says, there's only one where he says, I'm alone. No one's with me. Or at first no one stood by me. But Paul always has companions. Even when he's in prison, people are visiting him. He's summoning people. He's not going through it alone. In fact, Paul learned very early on, do not try to do this alone. And Paul always had other people he could share the ministry with. And so team leadership is going to be a lifesaver for you if your biggest stressor is ministry, because you'll always have someone to talk to. You'll always have companionship. You'll always have someone to share the burden. You won't be shouldering the whole, mountain of tasks by yourself. And, that's a big deal. The other thing is, are you praying? And, prayer, is one of the biggest, factors in dealing with anxiety. When you can go to God with whatever's bothering you, whatever's stressing you out. I mean, Paul says it, right? He says, be anxious for nothing, but with all supplication and thanksgiving, cast all your cares upon him, knowing he cares for you. I mean, right there, Paul's way ahead. I mean, talk about psychological insight, way ahead of his time. Paul knows right there. And he's like, hey, I got a remedy for your anxiety.
Here's an interesting thing. So one of my assistants, his name is Wayne, we were talking today, and he forwarded to me, because he's been doing some article work for me. He forwarded to me some highlights from a study on the benefits of meditation. And, think about how many times we're told, to meditate on certain things. Hold on a second. You guys taking off? Give me a hug. Oh, thank you, baby girl. Thank you, buddy boo. Yes. Yes. You see Peyton? My toothless wonder of a kid. He's missing all his teeth. All right, guys, have fun. I'll see you tonight. That's Peyton. Jesus steak. Yeah.
That look she's giving me is awesome.
I know.
That was
right?
priceless.
All right. That is a microphone. Yeah. All right, love you, home. What time are you home tonight? 8 o'clock? All right. Have fun. I would have gone with you, but, I got to work.
Peyton.
All right. See you guys. Have
You
fun.
so need to keep that in there.
What's that?
You so need to keep your son in there going, Peyton, 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 Peyton.
Jesus steak.
Jesus steak. Yes, she does not know. The look she was giving me was awesome. It was like,
I know.
I don't know what you are.
So here's the highlights from this benefits of meditation. And it totally makes me think about, how many times in the New Testament we're told to meditate on certain things.
Yep.
So this neurosurgeon, Harvard Medical School, Massachusetts General Hospital, they did the study. The significance of is overwhelming what they found. Let's see here. Individuals who meditate ultimately have more gray matter in the frontal cortex. Most notably, this gray matter is preserved in spite of aging. It's well documented that our cortex shrinks as we get older. It's harder to figure things out and remember things. But in this one region of the prefrontal cortex, 50-year-old meditators had the same amount of gray matter as 25-year-olds. In other words, as a result of transformations in the brain, individuals who meditate have a better chance of retaining their memory functions in old age. And let's see, in the study, the average meditation time was 27 minutes a day, and results were obtained in just 8 weeks after starting the practice. I just find that really fascinating, and the Bible tells us meditate on these things, meditate on, certain things. So, yeah.
Absolutely, man. Prayer, people who pray tend to live about, on average, research shows about 10 years longer. In the same way that people have pets. They find that people have pets or people who are married.
Did you have to go to the pets already?
Too soon?
Too soon.
So, all these things add up. So, spiritually, if you're disconnected from God, then that's also going to affect your psyche and your well-being. I kid you not. On days where I've been like, I'm time got away or whatever, and I'm rushing out the door, it's not the same.
Yeah.
Like the whole day is clouded versus, having a day where you just, I don't know, man, like I just sense God with me. I see him more. I see him in things more when I've connected with him in the morning and laid my whole day. And it's different. It's totally different. But yeah, one of the things that, you're going to need someone to talk to. And that's one of the things that with temptation or any struggle that you have, it thrives in the dark. You have to talk to people. You have to share, like you got to get over being ashamed, like, oh, I'm depressed and I'm supposed to be this leader. You're human, like you have to be real and you have to tell people, hey, I'm depressed. So you're not saying I got to go to a psychiatrist, but if you can't pull out of it, then maybe you should go see somebody. I would start with a counselor. And if the licensed counselor refers you on, if he does it first visit, I think you need to see a shrink. Probably not the guy to see, but if someone's going to talk to you a little bit,
one of the things too that I'm going to throw out there, guys, because this could be you. I'm going to tell you a little story, a little ditty about
Jack Diane,
about a church planner who shall remain nameless in this story. He's a church planner that I've had the opportunity to support over some time. And at one point, I could tell he kind of didn't want to bring it up, but he kind of brings it up to me. He's like, hey, you know what, man? I'm really feeling like I need to shut down my church plant. I need more time with my family. Mentally, I need more time. The stress that I'm feeling, this, that, and the next. And I could tell that he was worried in bringing that up with me. And the only reason I can think, because why would anyone care about bringing that up with me? Dude, I'm like, dude, if you feel like you got to shut down your church plant, shut down your church plant. Like your health is more important than the church plant.
Right.
By far. Your family, way more important than the church plant. By far.
Right.
But I think what it was in his case, I think it was because I've supported him. And he's afraid, I'm going to someone who supported me financially. What are they going to think when I tell them I might be closing this down? And I'll tell you my view on it. And this certainly won't be the view of everybody, but my view is I supported you because you were doing what God had called you to do.
Right.
And do you think that I'm going to be upset if your church plant doesn't take off? I'm personally not going to be upset. Honestly, that's God's job to make the church plant work. Your job is to show up and do what God's called you to do. But I would just encourage you right now, if you're going through this right emotionally, you've got depression coming in, maybe it's a spouse that's dealing with this, and you're like, I don't know if I can keep doing this church plant. Look, I'm not the one here that's telling you what God's telling you to do. I'm not God. But what I will say is this, dude, take care of your family. Take care of yourself. And if it means you got to walk away from the church plant or put it on hold, do it.
Right.
Because that is not, God isn't sitting there going, well, I just sent you all those folding chairs and now you're going to quit. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not, take care of your family. Take care of yourself.
Right. Right. Yeah, absolutely, man. And, you brought up earlier about, what about when your spouse is depressed? I think at that point you've got to, like you said, put your family first. If your wife is saying, hey, I don't know if I can do this church plant thing anymore, then you say, hey, no problem. Right. Again, if you're on a team leadership, the team takes over. That's why you're on a team. It means that you can step out. Maybe they could still pay you. I mean, maybe you say, hey guys, I got to take a sabbatical. Maybe it's time to get out altogether, because your wife might say, I don't want to break. I just think we need to get out. You have to listen to that. Your wife might say, or spouse, I could be talking to women here. It could be women church planners listening going, oh, it's my husband. Your spouse might say, hey, I actually, it's not the ministry. It's just, I'm going through this. And no, I don't think getting out of the ministry will change how I'm feeling. So don't assume it's the ministry, but also don't try to, quote unquote, protect the ministry. Your job is to protect your family.
And I think part of the problem is, as a society, we think ministry starts and stops inside of a building.
Right.
And that's not where ministry is. I mean, that can be a place that it happens, but
that's really good.
Being in ministry, it's being out among people.
Yeah.
It's how's the verse go? They'll know us by our love, right?
Yeah.
And how are they going to know us by our love if we're not out among them?
Right.
But if you're just stuck inside of your building and you think you're walking away from ministry, you might be walking away from that aspect of ministry, but you're not walking away from ministry by if that's what you have to do. Walk away from
that's
the church
it. And you're walking away from ministry by continuing in it if what your wife really needs is for you to minister to her.
Yeah.
You are walking away from ministry. You're just walking away from the greater ministry. The greater ministry is your spouse.
Yeah.
And if your spouse needs you to stop being Mr. Pastor Man or Mr. Church Planner Man or Mr. Big Shot, to stop and look at your wife and say, hey, I need to be there for you, then that's what you got to do. Because you're never going to have health in your either your life, ministry, or church if what is needed at that point is for you to step away and look after home team. Like I said, like you can still go on if your spouse is like, hey, look, this is no guilt thing. Like I have no problem putting ministry on hold, but it's not ministry, babe. It's something I'm going through. And I don't think we'd be you guys need to agree on what the plan is. So it's not like, oh, wait, your spouse is depressed, you got to get out. It's not that. You may be able to stay in, but again, team is a key. You might just need to say, hey, team, this is where we're at right now. And this is what I'm having to juggle. It's something we'll probably need to change once you clue into the fact that, hey, my spouse is depressed. And I know for a fact, listening right now, I know some of you guys are out there and you're like, thank you for bringing up the spouse, Pete, because it's not me I got a problem with. But you need a team. You need a team of people around you. You can't care for a depressed spouse and do ministry And if you're bivocational, well, good luck with that too, right? I mean, you just really, sometimes you just got to stop things, sometimes you got to just, slow down and be there for that person. And because if you don't, eventually your spouse is going to resent the ministry if they don't already.
Yep.
So something will need to change. It doesn't mean you got to get out. But like I said, if your spouse says, yeah, I actually think that's the answer, then get out, right? Or you will never be back in it, because when you crash, you'll crash hard.
Right.
And you will never go back in again if it gets to that point. Whereas I always tell guys, you can always take a break. And if you got a team, the team will be like, hey, we're holding the door, man. We're good. It's the beauty of it. So, hey, that's probably all that we have time for. Guys, real quick word before we get into our next bit. Reaching the Unreached is still, by the way, on sale in bulk discounts for $9 a book. You can go to reachingtheunreachedbook.com and you can check that out. And if you want to take your core team, your church plant, or your church through it, I promise you it will help mobilize your entire congregation on mission. Want to talk about having a team? Get everybody in your church to be a part of your team.
Do you want to know what depresses me?
Yeah, I'm sure it's the same thing that depresses me, Pete.
Payroll.
Oh, yeah.
IRS
what about
compliance.
IRS? Oh, yeah,
insurance.
Bookkeeping.
Websites.
You're depressing me right now.
I'm
but
just
you know
saying.
What the solution to that is? Do you know what the antipsychotic prescription I would give to you for that, Pete? SimplifyChurch.com. Was that you? That was pretty good.
Wait. Here we go.
What?
That should just be their clip now from now on. That should just always go on that commercial.
What is this SimplifyChurch.com, and where do I find SimplifyChurch.com?
Hey, Pete, SimplifyChurch.com is an organization by church planners for church planners to help you meet all of your giving, bookkeeping, and IRS compliancy needs. It's a dedicated team of professionals who will help you manage.
Did you forget?
Yeah. Just go there. SimplifyChurch.com. Afternoon podcast again.
Well, that's awesome. Why don't you go ahead and close us out there, Mr. Jones?
All right, guys. Well, hey, thanks for joining us today on the Church Planner Podcast. This has been Peyton Jones and Pete Mitchell, reminding you if you want to reach the ones nobody's reaching, you need to go where nobody's going and do what nobody's doing.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
Is this Pete Mitchell? This is Nigel calling for Pete Mitchell. Pete, it's Nigel. Please call me back. It's important that I speak with you, Pete.
Thanks for joining us for another weekly episode of the Church Planner Podcast with Pete Mitchell and Peyton Jones. We'd love to hear your comments on this episode of the Church Planner Podcast. Visit us online and let us know what you thought at churchplannerpodcast.com. If you subscribe to us via iTunes and have enjoyed the podcast, leave us a positive review. The more positive reviews we receive in iTunes, the more iTunes will promote us to other church planners who would benefit from this show. This podcast is brought to you by the Church Planner Magazine, which is available in the iTunes newsstand or online via churchplannermagazine.com.